Sir Edward Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm beginning to fear that this government doesn't understand the self-employed. And the reason I fear that is, yes, the IR35 proposals in front of us today, but the loan charge, and then the way that a large group of self-employed have been kept out of the support programs during this coronavirus crisis. I talk of the people who are newly self-employed, the people whose self-employment operates through a limited company, all who've got no help. I'm afraid this evidence is mounting up. And that's why I think there should be a review, not just into IR35, but into how self-employment is viewed, the way we tax it, the benefits that people get, so we can get a proper balance rather than this piecemeal approach that we have. I am really struck by the government's approach, which is, as the right honourable gentleman, the member for Holton, Price and Howden said, creating zero rights employment, employees without employment rights. This is just not acceptable. And that's why there needs to be a review before this goes any further. And I had expected a review. And the reason I'd expected a review is because the former Chancellor of the Exchequer said so during the last general election campaign. On the Paul Lewis Money Programme on BBC Radio 4, he made it clear, and he tweeted afterwards, there will be a review of IR35. But there hasn't been a review of IR35, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Democrats argued for one in the election, others did. There's been no such review. And that is a breach of promise to people, which has made people very angry. And the Minister today is promising a review once the legislation is on the statute books. That's not a review, Madam Deputy Speaker. That's trying to make good once the stable door has closed. Any review must take place ahead of any legislation if it's to be done in good faith. I'm afraid in the way that the government is treating the self-employed, in the way they are breaking their promise at the election, in the way they are now reviewing after they're proposing to review, after legislation in place, that is a breach of good faith to the 5 million self-employed people in our country, and that is just not acceptable. And when it comes to the details of IR35 in front of us, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Treasury Minister talks about the fact that these measures were trialled in the public sector before the private sector, and seems to think that it can be taken straight across. That's not real life. The public sector and its HR and payroll look at risks like tax liabilities in a very different way from the private sector. I would have thought the Minister would have known that. And therefore, I do not think you can draw the conclusions that the Minister is trying to draw. And I'm afraid the evidence, even ahead of this legislation, as people were preparing it, expecting it to come in this April, shows that the private sector takes a very different approach. That's why lots of people have ended up going abroad. It's why the Treasury will actually lose money as a result of this proposal. And that's my final point, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Treasury Minister trots out this idea that there's a lot of tax avoidance here, that these loopholes are closing. I actually think he should think again, because there are benefits that people are forgoing. I think this will end up costing the taxpayer, costing the country, and meaning there's less money for our public services if this measure goes through. It's the wrong measure at the wrong time. The government should withdraw it, should review, and do it in a wholesale way, not this piecemeal way. Thank you.